Okay, 8th grade. I hope you guys had a good weekend. You're still staying safe and all those kinds of things. Today we're still on the just computer. I hope that works okay. I'm just having some issues where I can't record right now. So, yeah. But we're going to be talking about analyzing word meanings. This is on page 40 in your packet. So analyzing word meanings, this isn't all about like context clues like we've talked about previously, but has a little bit to do with like inferences and understanding the different ways in which words can speak. So if you read right here, I'm going to scroll down. Again, we're talking about analyzing word meanings, so the meanings of words, both figurative and literal. So it says, what's the difference between saying he doesn't eat very much and he eats like a bird? So these two phrases mean the same thing, but the first sentence, which is he doesn't eat very much, is literal, and the second sentence is figurative. Literal meaning refers to the dictionary definition of words or phrases. So that's what we're looking for when we look at context clues. We're looking for the literal dictionary definition of words and phrases. So when we're using context clues, that's what we're looking for. So words or phrases with a figurative meaning express ideas in unusual or creative ways. Now, we've talked about similes and metaphors specifically when we were reading the lottery. We talked a lot about that. So a simile would be he eats like a bird because it's using that word like to compare he, whoever that is, to a bird, right? So he's eating a lot, he eats like a bird. That's the figurative meaning. He doesn't eat he eats very little. Sorry, not a lot. He eats very little. So he doesn't eat very much. We're literally just saying he doesn't eat very much. There's nothing to be misunderstood about that. He doesn't eat very much. So words may also have positive, neutral, or negative connotations, which we talked about back on page 38. I'm trying to pull it up here, but it doesn't want to load for me. That's okay. Denotation and connotation. That's kind of what they're hinting at there is positive, negative, and neutral connotations. Let's get back to that. There we go. So it says words may also have positive, neutral, or negative connotations, which we talked about last week. So those are the feelings associated with a word. Hopefully we have good understanding of that at this point. Now, some words might have technical meanings specific to a certain subject area. So when you read, be aware of these different types of meanings. It will improve your understanding of an author's message. We'll talk a little bit more about technical meaning because it's kind of hard to explain without an example. It says, read the magazine article below, circle an example of figurative language, underline words with strong connotations, and put a box around any technical words or phrases. So, we are going to circle examples of figurative language first, if I can find a way to do that. There we go. So, bald eagles are majestic creatures. Do we see anything figurative there? No, it's not. We're not seeing any similes and metaphors. It's just saying that they are majestic creatures. They sail and dive through the air like trained acrobats. Now, we're seeing that like word there. Now, we need to make sure that they are comparing it to something that is not what it actually is. So, they sail and dive through the air like trained acrobats. Are bald eagles trained acrobats? No. So we can go ahead and circle this whole portion here as our single piece of figurative language. So they sail and dive through the air like trained acrobats. So now we're going to underline words with strong connotations. Again, connotations are the negative, positive, neutral understanding of words. Now, bald eagles are majestic creatures. When we say majestic, are we being negative? No. Are we being neutral? No, I think we're a little bit biased saying that they're good, right? So majestic has sorry, that's not a very good underline, but it is what it is. Majestic gives a positive connotation to what bald eagles are, right? Now, we need to put a box around any technical words or phrases. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to highlight it because it makes it easier for me. They also have wingspans of up to 90 inches. That's more than 7 feet long. Now, what technical language is, because I didn't really explain this because I wanted to have an example with it, is words that are specific to the subject matter that we're talking about. Okay, so we're talking about bald eagles. Is inches specific to bald eagles? Can you talk about inches without talking about bald eagles or birds? Period. Yes. Inches is a universal thing. Same thing with feet, right? Now, a wingspan is specific to the subject of birds or planes or flying objects of some kind, right? So we're not going to be talking about wingspans unless we're talking about birds or flying objects. Okay? So wingspan is technical language because it's not just a word that you would just go using in everyday conversation. You would only use it if you were talking about birds or flying objects of some kind. So we look at the chart, it kind of explains what we've been talking about a little bit better. So we underline majestic as our connotative language, which is a positive connotation, which if you look at the effect on meaning, it says majestic encourage readers to think that the birds are more than ordinarily beautiful. So they're going out of their way to get the reader to think of bald eagles as being beautiful, amazing birds and animals. Now the technical word is wingspan. Again, wingspan is a specific term used to explain one of the eagle's characteristics. It is specific to the subject matter that we're talking about. You don't just use it in everyday language. Figurative, they sail and dive through the air like trained acrobats. Like I said, the simile, they sail and dive through the air like trained acrobats, compares an eagle's movement to that of an acrobat. So it's just giving you this visual image to compare the bald eagle's movements to. So it says, authors choose words and phrases carefully to convey meaning and feeling. Determining word meanings can help you understand how an author's specific word choice affects the text. So how does the author's choice in words, choice in language, affect how we as the reader understand or visualize the text? So again, we are analyzing these different types of word meanings in order to better understand our text. So let's take a look at page 41. We're going to go ahead and do page 41 and 42 together, and then you guys will do 43 and 44 on your own. So let's go ahead and read this. It's called the mollusk family. It says read the beginning of the scientific account about mollusks. It doesn't ask us to circle anything while we're reading it the first time. It doesn't ask us to underline anything. We just need to read it. So we're going to read through this on page 41. So it says the mollusk family. Did you ever imagine that a tiny snail and a giant octopus might be part of the same family tree? Most people don't realize that snails, mollusks, squid, and even octopods belong to the same category of creatures known as mollusks. These amazing creatures are invertebrates, which means they do not have spines. Mollusks share 3 basic body parts: a foot, a body, and a mantle. The foot is the fleshy part of the mollusk body, made up of mostly of muscle tissue. In a snail, the foot is the part of the mollusk that meets the ground and gently rolls the body forward. From this slow, measured motion comes the phrase, a snail's pace. A mollusk's soft body is like a fragile bag that holds the heart, the guts, and various internal organs. The mantle, which is often a shell or a tough, sturdy covering, functions like a suit of armor to protect the body. So, it says, explain how to answer this question. How do the word choices in the scientific account help you to understand the author's intended meaning? So that's what we're going to use to fill out this chart here. So we want to circle an example of figurative language, underline words with strong connotations, and put a box around which I'm going to highlight any technical words or phrases. So let's circle an example of figurative language first. So, did you ever imagine that a tiny snail and a giant octopus might be part of the same, let me get my circle ready. Might be part of the same family tree. Most people don't realize that snails, mussels, squid, and even octopods belong to the same category of creatures known as mollusks. These amazing creatures are invertebrates, which means they do not have spines. Mollusks share 3 basic body parts: a foot, a body, and a mantle. The foot is the fleshy part of the mollusk's body, made up mostly of muscle tissue. In a snail, the foot is the part of the mollusk that meets the ground and gently rolls the body forward. From this slow, measured motion comes the phrase, a snail's pace. A mollusk's body is like a fragile bag. Pause. A mollusk's body is like a fragile bag. Is a mollusk's body actually a bag, like a purse, like you would carry? No, but it is like a fragile bag. They're using that simile to compare. So let's put that in our chart. We would say a mollusk, we wouldn't capitalize it, we write it just how they would. A mollusk's body is like a fragile bag. That's all we have to say there. We'll come back and we'll look at effect on meaning. But for right now, we're just going to write it in there. So now the next thing that we're going to do is underline an example of a strong connotation. So I know it seems like we're rereading a lot, but that's okay. So did you ever imagine that a tiny snail and giant octopus might be part of the same family tree? Many people don't realize that snails, mussels, squid, and even octopods belong to the same category of creatures known as mollusks. These amazing creatures are invertebrates, which means they do not have spines. Okay, so amazing. Is that a negative word? No. Is it a neutral word? No. We can tell that that person obviously has a positive viewpoint on these creatures, right? Now, for looking for the technical words and phrases, let's look in that same sentence. These amazing creatures are invertebrates, which means they do not have spines. Would you see the word amazing talking about anything else? Yes. Creatures. That's a wide variety of things. Spines, wide variety of things. Now, invertebrates, is that a word you would hear in everyday language? No. So, invertebrates is our example. I want to make sure I spell that right. I already spelled it wrong. There we go. Is our example of technical language. So, now we need to explain how these different types of figurative language have an effect on the meaning of the text that we just read. Okay? So when we say a mollusk's body is like a fragile bag, what is the author trying to help us to understand by doing that? What are they doing by using that? Just take a second and think about that. So I think when the author uses this, they're using a simile, obviously. So they are comparing the mollusk body to a fragile bag. Now the question is not what are they doing, but more so why are they doing it? And this does what? What does comparing the mollusk body to a fragile bag help us do? This helps us to what? What did the acrobat simile help us to understand? To better visualize or understand the condition, I guess you could say, of the mollusk, right? The author wants us to really understand what the mollusk body is like, and by helping us to understand that, they're trying to compare it to something else that we know something about, which would be a fragile bag. We understand what a fragile bag is. So when they compare it to that, we can better visualize and understand the actual condition of the mollusk. So amazing. This is pretty self-explanatory. What are they trying to help us to understand by saying that they are amazing? They want readers to understand that mollusks are what? I spelled mollusks like 3 different ways. They're great creatures, right? They're not evil creatures or bad creatures. They're amazing creatures, right? They want us to understand that mollusks are good and that they appreciate them. Now, technical term invertebrates. So if we go back here, we saw the technical term. Wingspan is a specific term used to explain one of the eagle's characteristics. So, invertebrates, if we look back here, means that they don't have a spine. So, this is a word specific to mollusks that explains their condition. Sort of similar to the first one. It explains their condition using technical terminology, we'll say. So they want us to understand the scientific terms behind what they're trying to explain to us. So invertebrate is just one of those technical words to help us understand the meaning and what's happening in the text. And they do use context clues to explain that to us, which means they don't have spine. We know invertebrates don't have spines. So that's a big part of what we're reading there. So we move on to page 42. This is the last thing, 42. This is the last thing we're going to do together, and then you guys will move on to page 43 and 44 on your own, but we'll do this together really quickly. So it says, continue reading the account, use the close reading and the hint to help you answer the question. So we'll do the close reading first while we read this. It says, circle 2 phrases in the first paragraph. I'm going to highlight because it's easier. Circle 2 phrases in the first paragraph that help you understand the technical term defense mechanisms. So this is sort of like we're looking for context clues around defense mechanisms to help us understand what they mean here. So, because many mollusks creep along slowly, they need defense mechanisms. Mollusks with shells simply retreat into their body armor to protect themselves from predators. Well, we know that they are protecting themselves from predators. But the blue-ringed octopus, a mollusk found in the South Pacific, defends itself with a bite so fierce it is almost always fatal to humans. So it defends itself, right? So we know that defense mechanisms has to do with ways that it protects itself from predators or defends itself from predators. Right? That helps us understand that technical term defense mechanism. It's really not that complicated. We're just using those context clues surrounding it to help us to better understand the meaning of that technical term. Overall, mollusks are peaceful inhabitants of our planet. Whether they live on land or in the sea, they are not aggressive. Our taste for cooked mollusks, clams, and oysters, in fact, makes us far more dangerous to mollusks than they are to us. So now we're going to answer this question. It says, think about the connotations or feelings that the word suggests. How do those feelings differ? So which statement best explains why the author has used the words retreat, fierce, and fatal in the paragraph above? So in the first paragraph, let's just reread that. Because many mollusks creep along slowly, they need defense mechanisms. Mollusks with shells simply retreat into their body armor to protect themselves from predators. But the blue-ringed octopus, a mollusk found in the South Pacific, defends itself with a bite so fierce it is almost always fatal to humans. So we can see that these words, I can see how they have more of a, it would seem almost as if they were negative in some ways, but I could see how it could be spun positively. So let's read our possible answers here. So it says, to warn the readers that mollusks are often aggressive and dangerous. Well, I think we know that we eliminate answers first. So we know that this one is not an answer. How do we know that that one is not an answer? Well, because in the second paragraph it says, whether they live on land or in the sea, they are not aggressive. well, obviously she's not trying to tell us they're aggressive and dangerous because she literally says right here that they're not aggressive and dangerous. So we can immediately rule that out. So the next one says to emphasize the contrast between different mollusk defenses. Okay, well, she is sort of talking about the different types of mollusk because she says the blue ring mollusk defends itself with a bite that's fatal, whereas the other ones just retreat into their shells. So that's a possible answer. To explain the mystery behind a mollusk defense system, I think that's a fair answer too. We'll come back to those two. Or to call attention to the unusual shells grown by the mollusk family. Does she talk a whole lot about their shells other than when she says they retreat into them? No, she only really mentioned shells once. So that's not her main thing she's trying to get across here. So we need to figure out what the best explanation for why she uses those words is. So is she really trying to emphasize the difference between the mollusk defenses, or is she trying to explain more in depth the different types of mollusk defenses, or is she trying to compare and contrast them? Even though she does mention two different types of defense mechanisms here, she's not really comparing and contrasting them, right? She's just telling us about two different kinds because she's trying to explain how the mollusk defense system works. So our correct answer is C. Because all she's really trying to do is just explain how their defense system works. So our last thing here asked us, I'm going to go ahead and put the race strategy up here. So our last question asks us to look at the answer you chose above. Explain how the connotations of the word helped you to understand the ideas about mollusk defense systems that the author wanted to convey. So how did those, kind of what we talked about in the hint, how did those connotations of the words help us to understand what the author wants us to know about the mollusk defense systems? So let's look at the word retreat. When we think, let's go back here. When we think of the word retreat, I would personally have a negative connotation with that, just because that seems sort of cowardly and like they are running away, sort of. Fierce, however, I think could be spun really either way. You could take a positive or a negative connotation from it, depending on how you look at it. So the way you could look at it positively would be that they're really fierce and really strong. So, but if we look at the context in which it's used, it's a bite so fierce, it's almost always fatal to humans. Well, you could also take that word fierce to mean more like aggressive and violent, especially when paired with the word fatal, because fatal means that it could kill you, right? So there's not really a positive spin on that word. So we could say the connotations of the words helped us to understand so we could specifically say negative because I think we've come to understand that there are more negative connotations than positive connotations with those three words. So what did those negative connotations help us to understand? Well, what is she trying to do here? She's not trying to tell us that the mollusks are aggressive and dangerous, right? But what is she saying that we should not do? We shouldn't be afraid of the mollusks, right? And we should stop messing with them. She thinks that we should stop messing with them because they have these defense systems. And they're only going to use those defense systems if we, as people, mess with them. So she used those words to help us understand that the mollusks have strong defense systems that they can use if needed. And that we should not bother them, right? And now what's some evidence that we can say that she shows us in this article. I shouldn't say she because we don't know who wrote it. Our taste for cooked mollusks, clams, and oysters, in fact, makes us more dangerous. So we would say we can see this when they wrote, our taste for cooked mussels, I'll drop that down one row, cooked mussels, clams, and oysters, in fact, makes us far more dangerous. And we'll just put ... in the quotes. And we can say this shows that she believes we should leave the mollusks alone and understand they are not a threat to us. So we've restated our question and our answer. The negative connotations of the word helped us to understand. Then we answered when we said that mollusks have strong defense system that they can use if needed and that we should not bother them. Then we cited evidence. We said we can see this point when they wrote, sorry, I have to fix this balancing here. Oh my goodness. There we go. So we cited evidence. We said we can see this point when they wrote, our taste for cooked mussels, clams, and oysters, in fact, makes us far more dangerous. We explained that evidence. We say this shows that I should have said they believe we should leave the mollusks alone and understand that they are not a threat to us. My grammar is totally off today. So we just cite that evidence when necessary to better explain our answer. And I think in this situation we needed to cite evidence to better explain that. So now you guys are going to take a look at pages 43 and make sure you're using these close readings because it's really, really going to help you out. So make sure you look at page 43 and then you're going to do 44, and that's all you have to do for today is just those two pages on 43 and 44. So you're just going to be looking at, again, the whole point here is we're looking at those different word meanings, okay? So we're looking at the connotative word meanings, which we've already talked about. We talked about last week. The connotations, then the technical and figurative meanings. We don't really need to talk about literal meaning because it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just what the text is actually saying. There's nothing to understand from it. So again, look at page 43 and 44 for your assignment today. And if you need any help, I'll be available in office hours.